On May 29th, 1942, the United States Military Academy at West Point graduated its first class since the United States had entered the Second World War. As one newsreel put it at the time, gone is the lighthearted, carefree spirit of peacetime graduation. Of 374 cadets of the graduating class of 1942, 70 would not survive the war. Their stories deserve to be remembered. A United newsreel captured the graduation ceremony, proclaiming, "Cadets of the United States Military Academy assemble for their first graduation of World War II. Solemn and impressive is the ceremony as the youngsters receive their commissions." It was an important event, representing the nation's commitment to the war, and the cadets received their diplomas from no less than George C. Marshall, Chief of Staff of the United States Army.
We have our men all through the Pacific, in Burma, India, and in China. Recently, they struck at Tokyo. They have wintered in Greenland and in Iceland. They are landing in Ireland and in England, and they will land in France.
The class seemed anxious to join the fight. Worldwide News reported they are well aware of the dangers and responsibilities ahead of them. Yet if any single thought dominates them all, it is an impatience to be done with the schooling and on with the fighting. 374 of Uncle Sam's prized pupils, who feel they have merely been marking time since last December 7th, will be awarded degrees as Bachelors of Science next Friday morning. But far more important, they will receive commissions as second lieutenants in the United States Army. They would have to wait some more, however, as the news continues. Yet every receipt of their shining lieutenant's bars will not end the training period for these eager youngsters. Between then and assignment to achieve duty, still at least 3 months of intensive work in the Army's service schools, infantry, signal corps, engineers, artillery, and of course, the Air Forces. The Army Air Forces were really the new big thing, with the newsreel noting, "For the first time in the 140-year tradition of West Point, cadets go directly into the Air Corps, more than half the class electing to try for their wings." It seemed a daunting task. The academy had not been geared towards the growing air branch, and at the time the most flight time that a cadet could have gotten there was 4 hours. Cadets anxious to get on with the fighting would face a difficult road. The washout rate for pilot training was around 40%. Some of those would never make it to the war. Joseph Bell was born in Alabama, the son of an Army captain. He attended the Marion Military Institute in Marion, Alabama, before his appointment to West Point. After graduation, he trained as a fighter pilot, receiving his wings on December 13th, 1942, at Moore Field, and was assigned to the 5th Fighter Squadron. The New York Times reported that the young officer had recently won his wings and hoped to come east to spend the Christmas holidays with his stepfather and mother and 3 sisters. He was engaged to be married, the ceremony to be held New Year's Day. Joe died on December 17th, when his Republic P-43 pursuit fighter crashed near Moore Field. Lieutenant Bell was 23 years old. James Woodrow Bigbee was from Edmond, Oklahoma, where the Edmond booster reported he was known to hundreds of Edmond folks as Buddy. He was attending advanced flying school at Kelly Field, Texas, when the booster reported, on Tuesday, November 10th, 1942, he and Lieutenant Boris Pichella of Hartford, Connecticut, were about to take off when the plane that they were in nosed over on a concrete runway, and according to eyewitnesses, the crash killed the 2 men instantly. Lieutenant James Bigbee was 24. Charles Andrew Beaucond, Jr. was the son of an Army colonel. The Lafayette, Indiana Journal and Courier reported on January 19, 1943, that Lieutenant Beaucond had received his wings at Roswell Army Flying School in New Mexico and had been assigned to Davis-Monthan Airfield in Arizona. He had been assigned to the 355th Bomb Squadron, 302nd Bomb Group, operating consolidated B-24 bombers. But even before that story ran in his grandmother's local newspaper, Lieutenant Beaucond had perished. Co-pilot of a B-24 bomber, he and his crew had gone on a training bomb run just 25 miles from Davis-Monthan. They never returned. The wreckage was not found until March. The plane had gone down in Arizona's Galliero Mountains. All 11 on board had perished. 25-year-old Andrew Charles Beaucond Jr. never made it to war, but was a casualty of it nonetheless. As many as 15,000 U.S. aviators died in training accidents during the Second World War. Demonstrating the popularity of the Air Corps with the class, Jack Bogusch of Terrell County, Texas, was one of 35 West Point graduates to begin flight school at Greenville Army Airfield in Mississippi. He received his wings after advanced flying school at George Field, near Lawrenceville, Illinois. In January 1944, he was promoted to captain and assigned as operations officer of the 753rd Bombardment Squadron. On March 6, 1944, pilot Lloyd Andrew was ill, and Bogusch took his place on the first major daylight mission by the Army Air Force over Berlin, the 8th Air Force's deadly 250th mission, the subject of another episode of The History Guy. It was a deadly raid. A problem with the lead ship meant that the bombs were not dropped on the first run, and the group had to endure the deadly fire going through a second time. 5 aircraft were downed, the most lost by the 753rd on a single mission. Bogusch's B-24 was struck by both flak and German fighter attacks. He nursed the plane across the border into Holland, where the crew would have a better chance of escape, but having lost fuel pressure and power on 3 of the 4 engines, they dropped out of formation and headed down. Captain Bogusch did not manage to leave the plane. Bombardier Robert Swift stated that Captain Bogusch remained at the controls, attempting to get the engine started again, and failed to leave the controls in sufficient time to jump because the plane was at too low of an altitude. John Marion Baker of Oklahoma City was the son of an insurance salesman. He graduated from Oklahoma Military Academy before attending West Point. He had originally intended to become a bombardier, but instead became a pilot, receiving his wings in December of 1942 at Foster Field in Victoria, Texas. The Daily Oklahoman reported on December 16th that his fiancée, Miss Lucy Cunningham, would be joining him as soon as he got his orders. The Oklahoma City Daily Advertiser reported that it had to move up their wedding plans because of his military orders. Assigned to the 398th Bomber Group, 600th Bomb Squadron, he was trained to fly B-17s, but did not immediately go overseas, as the group was then assigned to train replacement crews for other organizations. John and Lucy had a son, John Jr., in April 1944. The same month, the 398th shipped out for England. They were the last B-17 group sent to Europe. By then, John was a captain, and he barely got to meet his newborn son before shipping out. On August 8, 1944, his bomber was on a mission to attack German troop concentrations south of Caen. The flak was very heavy, with the after-action report reporting that every single plane was hit by flak. Captain Baker's plane was hit by flak between the number 1 and number 2 engines. The wing broke off, and the plane spun into a crash. 2 men survived, but Captain Baker and the rest of the crew were killed. John Marion Baker was just shy of his 25th birthday. Henry Compton Benitez was the son of an Army colonel and trained as a B-17 pilot. Arriving in England on August 7, 1944, he was assigned to the 524th Bombardment Squadron. While he was still waiting to be assigned a crew, he volunteered to join an August 13th mission as a co-pilot in order to gain experience before commanding his own crew. It was his first combat mission. A memorial to him explained, while crossing the German lines near Falaise, France, at an altitude of 20,000 feet, the plane in which Lieutenant Benitez was flying sustained direct hits by German 88mm anti-aircraft fire. The pilot was wounded, 1 engine set afire, the controls damaged, and the instruments almost completely destroyed. Lieutenant Benitez immediately assumed control of the plane, and with the coolness and skill worthy of a veteran pilot, maintained level flight as well as his position in the formation until a serious fire broke out in the fuel tanks. He then left the formation and attempted to return to friendly territory. When it became apparent that the aircraft could no longer be kept in flight, the order was given to abandon the ship. Lieutenant Benitez was last seen leaving the pilot's compartment with his parachute. Shortly after, the plane exploded. The wounded pilot was blown clear and parachuted to safety, afterwards being captured by the Germans, who claimed that they had seen 8 parachutes, 1 burning at great height. There had been 9 crew members aboard. Benitez had kept the plane together long enough for the rest of the crew to escape, but was too late. He was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Leon Bilstin was from Los Angeles. He trained on the P-47 and had the distinction of briefly being the first commanding officer of the 371st Fighter Group, appointed its acting commander on July 15, 1943, when the group was established, pending the arrival of the permanent commander. He completed 100 combat missions with the 405th and 406th Fighter Squadrons. He was promoted to captain and started another combat tour with the 378th Fighter Squadron of the 302nd Fighter Group. His P-47 Thunderbolt was shot down in an attack at a rail yard on Kaiserslautern, Germany, on September 28, 1944. He went missing in action and was later declared as killed in action. No remains were found at the crash site in the railroad yard. He had been awarded the Air Medal with a stunning 11 gold stars. Michiganer Wayne Norbury Bolefahr received his wings at Foster Field, Texas, and was assigned to Grinder Field in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. While there, he married Ruth Oliver Bolefahr and had a son, Wade Jr. Bolefahr flew 61 missions, piloting P-47s and then P-51s. On April 14, 1944, the New Rochelle, New York Standard Star reported on his first aerial victory, donning an Me-109 while escorting a group of bombers. He told the paper, "I could see the enemy aircraft attacking the straggling B-17 about 10 miles away from me. As he climbed up to 12,000 feet on the port side of the bomber, I flew in behind him, opening fire dead astern from 300 yards away." On June 27th, the Standard Star reported that Captain Bolefahr was leading his flight on day and night missions since the start of the Big Push. He had been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, and was credited with restoring 2 enemy aircraft and damaging another. But by the time that report had made the paper, he was already dead. On June 10th, he'd been assigned a mission to escort 4 photographic reconnaissance airplanes to secure photographs of important military installations at Antwerp, Belgium. Owing to the nature of the targets, it was necessary that the photographs be taken from an extremely low altitude. His citation reads, "Captain Bolefahr sensed at once that as long as the many guns were directing their fire at the reconnaissance planes, they would not be able to maneuver into a position favorable for taking the photos." With utter disregard for his own personal safety, and in full knowledge of the fact that his chances of escaping the resultant fire were negligible, he pulled up to a height of 100 feet, flying directly towards the marshalling yard's main gun positions. Captain Bolefahr's tactic of making himself the most obvious target in the area succeeded in diverting fire from the PRU planes to his own, and the former were consequently able to accomplish their mission. But by so doing, he made his aircraft an easy target, and it received many vital hits. The plane crashed through a row of trees, disintegrating as it struck the ground. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. The citation concludes, "The coolness and daring with which Captain Bolefahr executed this feat, and his outstanding gallantry in the face of overwhelming odds, were an inspiration to his fellow flyers. His action reflects the greatest credit upon himself and the armed forces of the United States." Listed as missing for 6 months, he was declared killed in action in December 1944. Carey H. Hank Brown, Jr. of Rochester, New York, was the son of a West Point graduate and Army colonel. At the academy, he excelled at track and lacrosse, but also enjoyed bridge and chess, and was described as the epitome of a West Point graduate. Upon graduation, Brown went to flight school at Randolph Field, Texas, and received his wings at Foster Field in December before being sent to Mitchell Field in Long Island. He shipped off to England in October 1943 as a flight leader in the 357th Fighter Squadron. He named his P-47 Jeepers 3. He would earn 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses and 6 Air Medals, and be credited with 1 enemy kill. His citation noted, "The skillful and zealous manner in which he has sought out the enemy and destroyed him, his devotion to duty and courage under all conditions, serve as an inspiration to his fellow flyers." Lieutenant Ross Major wrote of him, "Through 110 hours of combat, facing enemy fights, anti-aircraft fire, and many days of wicked weather, I flew on Hank's wing." In the spring of 1944, the squadron began receiving P-51s to replace their P-47s. It was Brown's day off, and so he decided to take his new P-51 up. Major wrote, "The weather was vicious and typical of the junk that always fills the sky over here. Low clouds and rain squalls with a good haze layer." 20 minutes after his takeoff, he was seen to be doing acrobatics over a nearby aerodrome and then to start a series of loops. The third loop stalled Herc out, and it began to spin from 5,000 feet and never recovered. Major wrote, "Thus ended the career of the best man, pilot, and friend I ever met, and I cannot yet believe it is possible." Captain Carey Brown, Jr. was 24. Carey's younger brother Alston graduated from the Academy in 1943 and was killed in an air accident in 1958. Of course, not every cadet went into the Air Corps. Charles Berra of St. Louis went into the infantry, assigned to the 41st Armored Infantry Regiment of the 2nd Armored Division. The St. Louis Star-Times had reported in March 1943 that the young officer had been promoted 3 times in 9 months, reaching the rank of captain. Landing on D-Day with his unit, he made national news when the unit he was leading defeated what the St. Louis Post-Dispatch described as wildly charging German tanks and stormtroopers of the crack Das Reich combat team. In a 2-hour fight in the French village of Saint-Denis-le-Gast, Berra and his unit fought in quarters so close that, Berra told an Associated Press reporter, "You just stuck your pistol in someone's face and fired." When the defeated Germans fled, Berra and his men captured 130 prisoners. The paper described him as looking natty, even without a shave. Berra was awarded the Bronze Star for the action. The Post-Dispatch wrote that he had told his mother in a letter that after 20 days without removing his clothes, he managed to take a bath in his helmet and felt like a new man. He became executive officer of the regiment, being awarded the Silver Star for a successful attack against pillboxes and entrenchments of the Siegfried Line. His unprecedented plan of action organized assault and support teams, and he led several assaults which resulted in the capture of 22 enemy positions in 2 days, and in the breaking of a portion of the enemy line. The award was posthumous, merely noting, Captain Berra was killed in a subsequent battle. He was 27.
Of course, their deaths don't mean more because they were officers or because they attended the military academy, but there is something special about the West Point class of 1942 held up in that newsreel, proudly graduating, while veteran announcer Ed Hurley intoned, "The cream of America's young manhood, dedicated to honor and protect those things for which America stands, freedom and democracy." In a way, they really do represent America's sacrifice in the war. I was only able to talk about a few today, but this is just the first of many episodes. I fully intend to tell the story of each and every one of the 70 young men of the West Point class of 1942 who did not make it home. Their stories deserve to be remembered. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community and locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.